Happy New Year, everyone! I'm Megan Sullivan, and welcome to History and Games. I am so glad you're joining me today because I'm going to be talking about all the 2025 historical games you need to know about. If you like this sort of content and want me to do in-depth coverage for these games, please let me know in the comments below, and if you want, feel free to like this video and subscribe to this channel. It would really help me out. Thank you! So let's take a look at what history-based games are coming out in 2025, and I'll be doing this in order of release date so you can mark your calendar as we go along. First up, we have Dynasty Warriors Origins, which comes out on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation consoles January 17th. For those not familiar with the franchise, Dynasty Warriors is a hack-and-slash series by Omega Force and Koei Tecmo. Originally, it was a spin-off of another hack-and-slash series called Romance of the Three Kingdoms, based on the Chinese novel of the same name, but it very much became its own thing as it gained popularity. So, what can we expect from this new title? First off, very much improved graphics. Dynasty Warriors Origins looks great, and on PC, you can make things look even nicer by cranking the visuals up all the way to 4K Ultra HD resolution. Another highlight is that this game is newcomer friendly. If you love Chinese classical literature and history but you've never played a Dynasty Warriors game, no worries. Origins mechanics are designed with newbies in mind. On the other side of things, if you enjoy action games but don't know anything about Romance of the Three Kingdoms, no problem. This game introduces a nameless hero who's conveniently lost his memory. Thus, we'll be learning the names of historical people and places right alongside you. Other welcome features include more player freedom. Apparently, you'll get to choose the direction of the story as you progress through the game, and more strategic elements like a dodge and parry ability. And finally, if things get a little too hairy out there in the battlefield, you can summon an ally general who will take some of the edge off for you. I actually plan to do an impressions video for Dynasty Warriors Origins soon, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, there are some historical features in the game that could inspire people to learn more about China's history or act as a springboard for academics to teach people all about this time and place. For example, playing Origins could inspire people to learn about the Eastern Han Dynasty. According to the official website, the story starts 150 years after the foundation of the Eastern Han Dynasty, so history buffs have a reason to look into the events surrounding this particular era. This is also a great excuse to study up on the Yellow Turban Rebellion, a real incident in Chinese history that took place in the last part of the 2nd century AD and shook the Han Dynasty to its core. The game will also allow players to experience the very real Battle of Chibi or the Battle of Red Cliffs, in which Chinese warlords clashed for control. Origins will also feature real historical figures from the Three Kingdoms period, including the formidable generals Lu Bu, Liu Bei, and Zheng Fei, and I hope I'm pronouncing these names somewhat accurately. And finally, Origins can be used as a jumping-off point to talk about historic locations. The developer promises to let players experience the historical continent of China during the Three Kingdoms period, which should be super interesting. All in all, this game looks like a great way to kick off the new year. Then we have Kingdom Come: Deliverance II, developed by Warhorse Studios and published by Deep Silver, coming out on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox consoles February 4th. The sequel to the story-driven action RPG Kingdom Come: Deliverance is set in early 15th century Bohemia and promises historical accuracy as well as lots of player choices as the narrative follows Henry of Skalitz in his quest for vengeance. Gameplay features will include over 5 hours of cinematics, a large variety of historically accurate medieval weapons, consequences for player actions during quests, that's cool, refined combat to make it slightly less obtuse than it was in the first game, and lots of customization. But what makes this series such a standout is the developer's commitment to making a historically accurate world and narrative, which means that Kingdom Come: Deliverance 2 could be a great vehicle for teachers and students to learn all about 15th century Bohemia and the events that shaped it. They can also learn all about different types of medieval weaponry, learn about real historical figures that shaped Bohemia during this time, study up on historically accurate cities. This is a thing that Warhorse Studios is focused on, and I appreciate that. And finally, this is a chance to research historically accurate medieval fashion, which might be really interesting to talk about. Warhorse Studios is committed to taking us back in time, and we only have to wait a little bit more before the game comes out soon. Next, coming February 11th to PC is Civilization VII. Yay, this is a big one. The latest entry in the turn-based 4X strategy series by Firaxis and 2K Games lets players oversee the growth of a specific human civilization from early settlements to an advanced culture and features multiple historical figures to play as, each with their own base stats and special skills. Like in previous installments of the very popular turn-based strategy series, there are multiple victory conditions in Civilization VII. You can either try to dominate the world via military conquest or win through more peaceful or technical means. But of course, what makes this franchise so hilarious and appealing is the fact that famous people from completely different time periods and regions of the world will come into contact with each other. It's not unusual for the Democrats of ancient Athens to suddenly be neighbors with the denizens of, say, the Han Dynasty of China. And I actually do plan to do a History and Games episode about the time ancient China and ancient Greece collided, so stay tuned for that. At any rate, since Civilization VII has changed a few key gameplay mechanics, you don't have to have played previous Civilization games to give this one a go. You see, in terms of gameplay features, we're now gaining the ability to navigate rivers, which is awesome and will make exploration more realistic and fun. Barbarian hordes that used to randomly attack your units while they were innocently wandering around the map have been replaced with independent powers, who may or may not be hostile and whose camps can turn into city-states. Also, although commanders are now the only military units to gain experience, they have bonuses that can affect the troops around them, and those troops can now be stacked inside the commander and moved as a group. There's also multiplayer available as well as PC/console crossplay, which is great if you want to play with friends. And there's even a new skill called Influence that can help players pull off certain diplomatic actions, such as gaining the loyalty of city-states or stopping a bad relationship from getting worse. Plus, scouts can see further ahead now by building watchtowers. Neat. These are just a handful of the new features we can expect to see in Civilization VII, but which historical people and places can we learn about by playing the game? Well, Civilization VII will feature many new and famous leaders like Hatshepsut of Egypt, Xerxes of Persia, and the Tron sisters of Vietnam. On top of that, and this is new, leaders no longer have to be heads of state. Characters like Ben Franklin and Harriet Tubman can also be leaders. Another historical feature, and I admit this one has created some controversy amongst fans, is the New Era initiative. The game is now divided into 3 longer ages: the Age of Antiquity, the Age of Exploration, and the Modern Age. The controversy is that once you reach the end of an age, you have to switch to a new civilization, even though you can keep your starting leader. I know people are bummed about this, but if there is an upside, this is the perfect excuse to learn about new cultures and civilizations as you progress, and from an educational point of view, that's actually not a bad thing. And that's not all. Firaxis is reintroducing disasters, and every age will come to an end through some sort of crisis. This is an opportunity to research or tell students about the fall of major past civilizations, almost all of which ended up falling due to a catastrophe of some sort. For example, the Bronze Age people around the Mediterranean succumbed to a mega drought, the Roman Empire fell due to a series of crises, and the British Empire crumbled in the face of 2 world wars. So this realistic take on the fall of civilizations is a good chance to do some historical research on how and why these civilizations disappeared. Another educational jumping off point could be the topic of foreign leaders in foreign lands. In Civilization VII, leaders don't have to lead their home civilization. If you want Hatshepsut to be the leader of the Roman Empire, sure, why not? Now, I admit this should go into the gameplay features simply because mixing and matching the stats and skills of leaders with different civilizations opens up all sorts of interesting possibilities in terms of gameplay, at least I assume that's what's going to happen. But it's also a chance to read up on foreign leaders trying to rule countries that are not their own. See, for example, Ptolemaic Egypt. And finally, Civilization reintroduces a feature that is very influential on history, which is religion. By re-emphasizing this feature, teachers and students can explore the ancient pantheons of Egypt and Rome, study Zoroastrianism, the religion of ancient Persia, or even learn how religion played a huge part in the rise of Charlemagne. There are so many historical angles to Civilization 7, and they're going to be really fun to explore. Again, Civilization comes out February 11th, and it looks like it's going to be a good time. But no sooner have we started Civilization 7 than we have to make way for Assassin's Creed Shadows, coming out February 14th on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC. The latest iteration of the action RPG stealth series by Ubisoft takes place at the end of Japan's Warring States period and stars not one but two protagonists. Yasuke, a loyal retainer to the infamous warlord Oda Nobunaga and a real historical figure, and Naoe, a female assassin based on the real-life female ninja known as Kunoichi. Naoe and Yasuke's worlds collide after Nobunaga's real-life assault on Iga Province, an area of Japan where people actively practice the art of ninjutsu. This is the first Assassin's Creed game to take place in Japan, and there are a lot of reasons to look forward to it. Gameplay-wise, we have dual protagonists. This means players are offered two distinct styles of gameplay. If you like smashing things with a club or swinging around a samurai sword, then Yasuke's your man. If you prefer the more traditional stealth elements of Assassin's Creed, then Naoe and her nifty ninja gadgets are the way to go. While controlling these two distinct characters, players can also use a variety of unique and historically accurate weapons, including Portuguese firearms, war clubs, shuriken, yari spears, and a sickle on a chain known as a kusarigama. And there are two other very important features we have to look forward to, which are participating in romances and petting floofy Shiba Inus. Yes, that counts as a feature. As for mining historical content for the classroom or just for yourself, there's a lot to extract here. For example, this game is a great reason to learn all about the history of Oda Nobunaga, the first great unifier of Japan. Oda Nobunaga was extremely eccentric and unpredictable. He could be absolutely ruthless to his enemies, but he was also very unusual in that he believed in a meritocracy and promoted people not based on their birth or their wealth, which was highly unusual in Japan at the time, but on their skill. Nobunaga's spectacular rise and fall is fascinating, and this game gives us a reason to learn all about it. But we can also learn more about Yasuke. Now, admittedly, there's not a whole lot known about this enslaved person brought over to Japan with Jesuit mercenaries in the late 16th century, but the few eyewitness accounts of Yasuke we have are super interesting. He clearly made a positive impression everywhere he went, and although he started his life in Japan as an enslaved person, he ended up being in the extremely enviable position of Nobunaga's personal sword bearer. By the way, this is a topic I've covered in a previous video if you want to check it out. But if you're more interested in the history of ninja, Assassin's Creed Shadows is also a nice starting point to go study up on the history of ninjutsu in Iga Province. Iga Province was an area of Japan full of feisty, independent people who developed specific combat skills that were so impressive the future shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu would employ them to guard his castle. Speaking of castles, we can also learn about real battles involving Nobunaga and other warlords that take place during this time period, although we don't know all the details of which battles we'll get to experience in Assassin's Creed Shadows just yet. I've always wanted an Assassin's Creed game to take place in Japan, and so I'm super excited to play this game when it comes out February 14th. Next up is Suikoden 1 and 2 Remaster by Konami, coming out March 6th on all major consoles plus PC. Suikoden is a turn-based RPG series loosely based on the classic Chinese novel Water Margin, which gamers will know by its Japanese name, Suikoden. In the series, players must put together a party of up to 108 heroes and fight the injustice and corruption that plagues this fictional version of ancient China. There are a lot of reasons to be excited for this double remaster, and here are some of them. In terms of gameplay improvements, all background illustrations have been upgraded to HD visuals, there are updated sound effects, a new autosave feature has been added, a new Battle Fast Forward button has been included, that is a huge quality of life improvement, and there are now conversation logs because you're going to be talking to a lot of people. As for historical features, the Suikoden series is the perfect launching pad for teaching or learning about the Northern Song Dynasty of China, which lasted from 980 to 1126 AD. This was a very dynamic time in China with continuous warfare, but also advances in technology, science, math, and engineering. So it's a great research topic all around. But that's not the only time period we have an excuse to learn about. The novel itself was written sometime between the end of the Yuan dynasty and Ming dynasties of China, both of which are fascinating time periods, so there's lots to explore there. And finally, we can talk about water margin's impact outside of China, particularly in places like Japan, where during the 19th century there was a huge Suikoden craze. There's lots of historical features to talk about here, and it's exciting. Ooh, speaking of exciting, then there's Hangar 13 and 2K's upcoming third-person action adventure game, Mafia: The Old Country, coming out on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC this summer. This gritty mob story is set in the brutal underworld of 1900s Sicily. Players must fight to survive as Enzo Favara, who journeys from a childhood of indentured labor in Sicily's deadly sulfur mines to joining the Torrisi crime family. Old Country promises the following gameplay features: the ability to traverse Sicily in nifty early 20th century automobiles, or on foot or on horseback, various weapons like a stiletto knife or period-authentic weapons for different types of combat, visuals powered by the Unreal Engine 5, and advanced motion capture technology to convey actor performances, which is super important to the series. But of course, we're here for the history, and playing this game could inspire us to learn more about the real origins of the Mafia and the families who started it and why, the cultural and historical significance of early 20th century Sicily, how and why the Mafia spread overseas, including to America. We can learn about vintage weapons, objects, and vehicles in this particular time period. And we can learn more about the Sicilian dialect, Sicilian food, and even the ancient history of Sicily. Okay, now we've covered the games we have solid dates for, so let's turn to the games that we know are coming out in 2025, but we still don't know exactly when. And first up is Titan Quest II, which is supposed to come out in early access anytime now. Titan Quest II is a sequel to the popular 2006 action RPG Titan Quest, where players ran around ancient Greece, Egypt, and the Silk Road fighting men and mythological monsters. But what made it historical is that you would run into real historical figures in real historical places. And Titan Quest II, which is all about a Spartan soldier attempting to stop the goddess of retribution Nemesis from controlling the three fates and causing trouble, looks to do the same. Now, Titan Quest II is being made by Grimoire Games as opposed to the original developer, but it looks like Grimoire Games is committed to making this a fun experience for everyone. Gameplay features include a campaign that is hyper-focused on exploration, more intelligent enemy designs, a huge upgrade in graphics and sound, multiplayer, and a flexible and deep skill tree. You'll actually be able to wield dual classes just like in the first game. And I covered some of this in depth in my last video about Titan Quest II, so check that video out for more details. And this is all well and good, but now we get to the historical features that we can extract some education from. For example, we can learn all about Nemesis, not just in the context of mythology, but in history. You see, Nemesis was given due honors after the ancient Athenians won the Battle of Marathon against an invading Persian army in 490 BCE. And learning about that battle and how Nemesis ties into it could be really fun. We can also learn about lesser-known city-states. The first Titan Quest had a lot of real locations in Greece to visit, some being rather obscure, like Tegea, which was a small city-state just outside of Sparta. This kind of attention to historical detail is what made Titan Quest so fantastic. And Titan Quest II will likely have a lot of real historical locations to talk about as well. Also, and I know this sounds more like fiction than fact, but we can read up on griffins. I know, griffins may seem like a fictional being, but in fact, unlike the Hydra or the Chimera, the Greeks believed them to be real living creatures dwelling somewhere in the Far East. And they supposedly had evidence in the form of monstrous bones found in the Gobi Desert. According to friend of the show, Adrian Mayer, those bones might be that of a dinosaur. So there's lots to explore there as well. Titan Quest II also lets you customize your hero and wield 2 different vocations. Now, having 2 different vocations wasn't usual in ancient Greece, but this is a chance to deep dive the Greek army's makeup at different times. For example, in the Archaic period, it used to be assumed that hoplites were the main body of the army, but recent scholarship argues that archers, peltasts, knights, and others deserve more credit than they really get. And of course, Titan Quest II gives us an excuse to look more into the Greek pantheon or Greek religion in general. It's not clear when Titan Quest II is coming out, but like I said, early access should be happening soon. Up next is one I'm really excited for, Ghost of Yotei. Ghost of Yotei is a much-anticipated sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, Sucker Punch's excellent action RPG that takes place during the first Mongol invasion of Japan in 1274 AD. In that game, the protagonist Jin Sakai attempts to stop the Mongolian hordes while dealing with more local issues on the tiny island of Tsushima. It's an excellent game that I highly recommend everybody play. Ghost of Yotei, however, takes place over 300 years after the events of the first game and is centered around the theme of underdog vengeance. Named after a famously beautiful volcano called Mount Yotei, the game is set on the island of Hokkaido, Japan in 1603 and stars a new hero named Atsu. We don't know a lot about the story yet, but we do know there are some exciting features to look forward to, including gorgeous HD graphics, more narrative choices. According to the developer, players will have more control over Atsu's narrative and actions compared to Ghost of Tsushima's Jin Sakai, a new protagonist and thus a new point of view, and likely other gameplay features we don't know a whole lot about yet. Now, like I said before, Ghost of Tsushima was based on real events at the end of Japan's Kamakura era, and while I'm surprised that a direct sequel didn't happen, there were, after all, 2 attempts by Kublai Khan to invade Japan in the 13th century, it's exciting to deal with a whole new historical perspective. So let's talk about the types of historical discussions that could come up while playing the game, the history and legends surrounding Mount Yotei, and Hokkaido in general. Hokkaido wasn't really all that incorporated into Japan at this time and wouldn't have shared the exact same culture and belief systems, so that would be interesting to explore. The history of Japan's native indigenous people, the Ainu, particularly how they were forced to relocate to Hokkaido and how they've survived there ever since. That would be a fascinating topic. There's also an opportunity to research more about the rise of the shogunate. You see, 1603 is a significant date in Japanese history, as that was when Tokugawa Ieyasu, the third strongman who completed the unification of Japan that started under Oda Nobunaga, officially became shogun, or generalissimo, the de facto ruler of all of Japan. And it should be noted at this point, the emperor was a mere figurehead. This event kicked off the Tokugawa era, which lasted for nearly 300 years. But it might also be interesting to explore the rise of the Matsumai clan. The Matsumai clan was a group of aristocrats given control of Hokkaido by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the second strongman of Japan who helped unify the country. The Matsumai clan had close contact with the Ainu, although they weren't always popular with the locals, and a rebellion broke out in the late 17th century, but was put down by the Matsumai. Playing Ghost of Yotei could provide an opportunity to look more closely at the Matsumai and Japan's overall relationship with the Ainu, which was and is in many ways contentious. There are a lot of historical angles we can cover with Ghost of Yotei, and hopefully we'll get a chance to discover them all when the game comes out sometime this year. Then we have Ubisoft's Anno 117 Pax Romana, a game that features a unique mix of traditional city building and 4X features like diplomacy, military, and narrative choices. The game takes place in, you guessed it, 117 AD at the height of the Pax Romana. According to the official website, players embody a Roman governor who can either follow the path laid before them and be a good little Roman citizen, or boldly question the status quo and build up cities where alternatives beckon. How players build their city, deal with trade, and expand their territory is entirely up to them. This is another game we don't know a whole lot about, but the features we do know about include the chance to journey through Roman imperial territory, including places like Latium and Albion, the ability to expand a territory's influence and harness the unique advantages and challenges each area presents, make choices that matter and will affect the outcome of the game, and of course the game is set in a new time period, which means we can learn and talk about the history behind the game. Now, ancient Rome is always a fascinating topic, so there are a lot of historical features to dive into. These features include learning more about places like Latium and Albion, learning about events taking place in 117 AD, which include Hadrian succeeding Trajan as emperor, the Jewish revolt being put down, and the empire reaching its greatest extent. This game is also a great opportunity to learn about Hadrian, an interesting personality to say the least, who ruled the Roman Empire at its zenith from 117 until 138 AD. And he didn't do it alone. Anno 117 could provide an opportunity to learn more about the Roman army and its makeup, and learn about Roman allies and enemies. Now, I was going to include Marvel 1943 Rise of Hydra, but we don't know anything about it yet other than it takes place in occupied Paris during World War II, and it's more comic booky than history, but I still wanted to give it a shout out. I also wanted to give a shout out to Pompeii: The Legacy by Sischia Games, which is a unique city builder that allows you to rebuild Pompeii after a catastrophe strikes it, you know the one, and Scarlet Deer Inn by Ottu Games, an embroidered narrative platformer based on Slavic folklore. I tried the demo and it's really good and I love the art style. So there are all the history-based games you need to know about in 2025. Am I missing any? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. See you later.